She walked through fire to save her sister, and the alpha vampire saw her as his equal. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. She had been 12 when their parents died, leaving her to raise Mira alone in the servants' quarters of the Thornfield estate. Now, at 23, Ilara worked herself to exhaustion every day, scrubbing floors, mending clothes, preparing meals, all to keep her 17-year-old sister safe and fed. But safety was an illusion in a world where vampires ruled the night and humans were little more than cattle with delusions of autonomy. The fire had started in Lord Casimir's wing. That's what the other servants whispered as they fled into the night, abandoning the manor to its fate. But Mira had been in the Eastern Tower, organizing the library as she did every evening. And when Ilara arrived from the market to find the estate engulfed in flames, she didn't hesitate. She wrapped her shawl around her face and plunged into the inferno. The main staircase had already collapsed. Ilara took the servants' passage, the narrow stone steps that wound through the walls like a secret artery. The heat was unbearable. Her dress caught fire twice, and twice she ripped away the burning fabric, leaving herself in her thin undergarments. Her feet blistered on the scorching stones. The smoke made every breath an agony. But she climbed. When she reached the library corridor, a beam crashed down in front of her, blocking the path. Ilara didn't think. She grabbed the burning wood with her bare hands and shoved it aside, feeling her palms sear and split. The pain was distant, unreal, less important than the sound of Mira's voice calling her name. "Ilara! Ilara! I can't get out!" The library door was jammed. Ilara threw her shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th impact, something in her shoulder gave way with a sickening crack, but the door burst open. Inside, Mira huddled beneath a heavy oak table, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "Come on!" Ilara's voice was a raw rasp. She grabbed Mira's hand with her ruined fingers and pulled her sister out into the corridor. But the servants' passage was gone, consumed by the fire they'd climbed through. The main staircase was a memory of ash. They were trapped in a ring of flames on the 3rd floor of a dying building. That's when he appeared. One moment they were alone in the smoke and heat. The next, a figure stood before them in the corridor, tall, impossibly still, untouched by the fire that raged around him. His clothes were immaculate, a black coat with silver buttons, a high collar that framed a face of devastating, inhuman beauty. His eyes were the color of old blood in moonlight. Lord Casimir Valdrin, the master of Thornfield, the vampire who owned everything in the valley, including the lives of everyone who lived there. Mira whimpered and pressed against Ilara's burned back. Ilara stepped in front of her sister, swaying on her ruined feet, her broken shoulder hanging at an unnatural angle. She had nothing, no weapon, no strength, no hope. But she squared her jaw and met the vampire's ancient eyes. "Please." The word came out as barely a whisper through her smoke-damaged throat. "Take my sister. Let her live." Casimir tilted his head, studying her with an expression that might have been curiosity. "And you?" "I don't matter. Just save Mira." For a long moment, the vampire said nothing. The fire roared around them, timbers crashing, glass exploding from the heat. Then he moved, faster than human eyes could follow, and suddenly both sisters were in his arms. The world blurred, wind rushed past them. And then they were standing in the cool night air of the garden, the manor a towering inferno behind them, while other servants gathered at a safe distance, their faces painted orange by the flames. Casimir set Mira down gently on the grass, but he didn't release Alara. Instead, he held her burned, broken body against his chest, his impossibly strong hands cradling her with unexpected care. "You walked through fire," he said quietly, his voice like silk over steel. Ilara's vision was fading, shock and pain finally overwhelming her adrenaline. "She's all I have. You offered yourself in her place, to me, a creature you know shows no mercy. I know what you are." Blood flecked her lips as she spoke. "I've seen what you do to those who displease you. But Mira is innocent. She's good. She deserves to live." Something flickered in those ancient eyes, something that might have been recognition, or memory, or the faintest spark of emotion long thought dead. Casimir looked down at the mortal woman dying in his arms, her body destroyed by her desperate courage, and felt that unfamiliar sensation again. Interest. No. More than that, respect. In 300 years, he had seen humans beg and plead and grovel. He had watched them sacrifice others to save themselves, had witnessed every permutation of cowardice and selfishness that mortality could produce. But this woman had charged into an inferno without hesitation, had burned herself to ash and shattered her own bones, all to save someone else. She had walked through fire. And she had survived long enough to offer herself for her sister's life. Such a spirit was rare. Lord Casimir, one of his lieutenants, approached, another vampire with less age and less control. "The fire was set deliberately. We found accelerants in your chambers. It was an assassination attempt by the Kressler clan." Casimir didn't look away from Alara's face. "Hunt them down. All of them. Leave none alive." "Yes, my lord. What about the human servants?" "They may return to the village. Give them compensation for the night's terror." His arms tightened fractionally around Alara's broken form. "Except this one. She stays with me." Mira let out a sob. "Please, my lord, don't hurt her. She saved your library." "I have no interest in hurting her." Casimir finally turned his gaze to the younger sister, and his eyes held a command that would not be defied. "Go to the village. Tell them you are under my protection. Anyone who harms you will answer to me personally. Your sister will be returned to you when she is healed." "Healed?" Mira's voice was small, confused. "But she's not dead yet, and I do not permit such courage to die unrewarded." Casimir looked back down at Alara, who was barely conscious now, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "You walked through fire. You showed me something I had forgotten existed in mortals. For that, you will live. And when you wake, we will discuss what you are worth." Ilara's last conscious thought was that his eyes were not as cold as she had always believed. Then the darkness took her, and she knew nothing more. She woke 3 days later in a bed softer than anything she had ever touched in her life. The room around her was vast, furnished with dark wood and deep burgundy fabrics. Tall windows looked out over gardens that glittered with early morning frost. A fire crackled in an enormous hearth, warming air that smelled of cedar and old books. For a moment, Ilara thought she must still be dreaming, trapped in some fever vision induced by smoke and pain. Then she tried to sit up, and her body informed her that she was very much alive. Except she wasn't in pain. Ilara looked down at her hands. The hands that had been burned to raw meat that should have been destroyed beyond use. The skin was smooth, unblemished, perfect. She touched her shoulder, rolling it experimentally. No crack, no grinding of bone. It moved fluidly, painlessly. She threw back the covers and examined her feet. They were whole. Her legs, which should have been scarred and blistered, were unmarked. You heal well. Ilara's head snapped up. Casimir stood in the doorway, still dressed in black, still impossibly beautiful in that unnatural way vampires had. His expression was unreadable as he approached the bed with measured steps. "How?" Ilara's voice was steady, though her heart hammered. "My injuries were fatal." "Yes." Casimir stopped a respectful distance from the bed. "You were dying. I gave you my blood." The room seemed to tilt. Ilara gripped the sheets with her perfect, unmarked hands. "You turned me?" "No. Turning requires draining you first, then feeding you vampire blood while you die. I simply gave you enough to heal your wounds." His head tilted slightly, that curious gesture she remembered from the fire. "You are still human, still mortal. You will age and die as your kind do, but you will bear no scars from your ordeal." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Were nothing to you. Servants, cattle. Why save me?" Casimir was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of years beyond counting. 3 centuries ago, I watched my sister walk into a burning church to save children she did not know. The vampire hunters had set the fire as a trap, knowing she would not abandon innocents, even human ones. She burned. I was too late to save her. His eyes met Ilara's, and she saw something ancient and terrible in their depths. "When I saw you in those flames, refusing to stop, refusing to save yourself, I remembered what it was to witness true courage, and I would not let such courage burn to ash, not again." Ilara stared at him, this creature of legend and nightmare, and saw past the monster to the person he had been before centuries of darkness had buried his heart. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "about your sister." Something flickered across his perfect features, surprise, perhaps, that she would offer sympathy to him. "She would have liked you. She always believed humans were capable of greatness if given the chance to prove it. And you stopped believing that? I have seen very little evidence to support her faith." Casimir moved to the window, looking out over his estate. "Until 3 nights ago, when a servant girl with nothing to her name and no reason to love her masters ran into an inferno because her sister needed her." Ilara slipped out of bed, steadier now, and found herself dressed in a simple but well-made nightgown. Someone had cared for her while she was unconscious. She moved to stand beside the vampire, though she maintained a careful distance. "Where is Mira?" "In the village, as I promised, under my protection. No harm has come to her." "Thank you." Ilara paused, then added quietly, "May I return to her now?" Casimir turned to face her fully, and his expression was complex, calculated and considering. "I have a proposition for you." Everything in Ilara's body went still. Propositions from vampires were never simple, never safe. But she had no power here, no leverage, no choice but to listen. "What kind of proposition?" "You demonstrated something rare in that fire. Not just courage, but intelligence under pressure. You knew the servants' passages, remembered the layout even through smoke and pain, adapted when your path was blocked." His eyes held hers. "I need someone with those qualities. Someone who can think, who can act decisively, who cannot be bought or intimidated because they have already survived the worst and have something more important than their own life to protect. What are you asking me to do? Be my investigator, my problem solver, my voice among the humans of this valley. Casimir moved closer, and Alara forced herself not to step back. There are difficulties in my territory, thefts, murders, conspiracies, things that require a subtler touch than vampire law provides. You would look into these matters, report to me, help me maintain order without unnecessary bloodshed. You want me to spy for you. I want you to be my eyes where vampires cannot see, to be my ears where vampires are not trusted. He paused. And in return, I will pay you. Enough that your sister never has to work as a servant again. Enough that she can be educated, can make choices about her own life. Enough that you both have security for the rest of your mortal days. It was a gilded cage he was offering, a comfortable prison. But for Mira to be safe, to have opportunities, to have a future beyond scrubbing floors and hoping not to catch a vampire's hungry eye. If I refuse, then you return to the village with my thanks and a generous sum for your recovery. Your sister remains under my protection. You will both be left alone. Casimir's expression didn't change, but I think you understand that this is more than a job offer. This is a test. I want to know if the courage you showed in the fire extends to other areas, if the mind that navigated that inferno can navigate the more complex fires of vampire politics and human nature. Alara studied him, this ancient predator who had saved her life because she reminded him of a sister lost centuries ago, who now looked at her not as cattle, not as a servant, but as something approaching an equal. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably a trap. But when had safety ever been a luxury she could afford? I have conditions. One dark eyebrow rose. You negotiate with me? If I'm to be your investigator, then I need your word on certain things. Ilara's voice was steady, though her pulse raced. Mira remains untouched. No vampire feeds from her, threatens her, or uses her as leverage against me. Ever. Agreed. I will not kill for you. I'll investigate, I'll report, I'll advise, but I won't be your executioner. I have plenty of those already. Agreed. And when my work is done, when you no longer need my services, Mira and I are free to leave. No strings, no conditions, no suddenly remembered debts. Casimir was quiet for a moment, his ancient eyes searching her face. Then he extended one pale hand. You have my word. On the memory of my sister, these terms will be honored. Ilara looked at that offered hand, the hand of a vampire, a killer, a lord who could crush her with a thought, but also the hand that had carried her from the fire, that had given her his blood to save her life, that had protected her sister when he had no obligation to do so. She took it. His skin was cool, his grip firm but careful. Power thrummed beneath that touch, restrained and controlled. They shook once, and Ilara felt the weight of the moment, the understanding that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. When do I start? She asked. Now. Casimir released her hand and moved to the door. Get dressed. There are clothes in the wardrobe. When you're ready, come down to my study. We have our first mystery to solve. Which is? He paused in the doorway, looking back at her with an expression that might have been amusement. Who tried to kill me, and whether they succeeded in killing anyone else in the process. Then he was gone, leaving Ilara alone in the luxurious room with a choice made and a future uncertain. She dressed quickly in the clothes provided, practical trousers, a sturdy shirt, a warm jacket, all of which fit her perfectly. Someone had taken her measurements while she was unconscious. The thought should have been disturbing, but Alara was too focused on what came next to dwell on it. The study was not hard to find. She simply followed the scent of old books and older power down a grand staircase and through corridors lined with portraits of people long dead. When she reached the heavy oak door, she knocked once. Enter. Casimir's study was a reflection of the man himself, elegant, dark, filled with the accumulated wealth of centuries. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with papers, maps, and correspondence. The vampire lord sat behind it, reading something by candlelight, though the morning sun streamed through carefully curtained windows. "The fire started here," Casimir said without preamble, indicating a map of the manor spread across his desk. "My private chambers. Someone placed accelerants, lamp oil mostly, throughout the rooms and ignited them. I was not present. I was in the wine cellar, investigating a separate issue." Alara approached the desk, studying the map. "You think the fire was meant to look like an accident?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps they hoped I would be too dead to care how it looked." He glanced up at her. "Vampires can burn, you see. Fire is one of the few things that can truly destroy us. A clever assassination attempt." "Your lieutenant mentioned the Kressla clan. A rival family. We have disagreements over territorial boundaries." Casimir's tone suggested those disagreements involved significant bloodshed. "They would certainly benefit from my death. But something about this troubles me." "What?" "The timing. The method. If the Kresslers wanted me dead, they would send assassins." A blade in the dark. Poison in my blood wine. A coordinated attack by multiple vampires. This was crude, almost desperate. He pulled out another document, a letter, written in an elegant hand. "And then there is this, delivered the night before the fire." Alara took the letter carefully, reading. "Lord Valdrin, your protection of human cattle has made you weak. Your mercy toward mortals is an insult to our kind. The old ways are dying because of vampires like you who forget what we are. This is your only warning. Remember your nature, or be removed by those who have not forgotten theirs." The letter was unsigned. "This isn't from the Kresslers," Alara said slowly. "This is from someone within your own territory, someone who thinks you're too soft on humans." "Exactly." Casimir leaned back in his chair, watching her with that intense focus. "Which means the fire was not an assassination attempt by rivals. It was a message from allies turned enemies. Someone in my own court tried to kill me because they believe I am failing as a vampire lord." Alara set the letter down, her mind racing through implications. If they tried to kill you and failed, they'll try again, and next time they'll be more careful. Yes. "Do you know who in your court holds these views?" "Several of them, if I'm honest. Vampire society is built on strength and domination. My approach, allowing humans some autonomy, forbidding casual feeding, enforcing laws that protect mortals as well as our kind, is seen as radical by the old guard." Casimir stood, moving to look out the window at his rebuilt estate. "But I will not return to the days of humans as mere prey. I will not turn this valley into a hunting ground where terror is the only law. My sister believed in a better way, and I have spent 300 years proving she was right. Then you need to find out who sent this letter before they strike again." Alara moved to stand beside him, following his gaze out over the grounds. "And you need to do it quietly, without alarming the rest of your court, which is where you come in. Casimir turned to her, and there was something almost like approval in his expression. "You are human. The servants will talk to you. The villagers will trust you. You can ask questions that would seem suspicious coming from me or my vampire lieutenants. You can investigate without raising alarms. You want me to interrogate your own household? I want you to listen, to observe, to discover who among my people harbors enough resentment to commit murder." His voice hardened. "And make no mistake, this is murder they attempted. The fire killed 3 servants who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Humans who served me faithfully and died because someone wanted to make a point about vampire supremacy. 3 dead. 3 people who had done nothing wrong except be in a building when it burned." Ilara felt anger kindle in her chest, a cold, focused anger that sharpened her thoughts rather than clouding them. "Give me 3 days," she said. "I'll find your traitor." Casimir studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You remind me so much of her. That same determination, that same refusal to accept injustice." He moved back to his desk and pulled out a small leather journal, handing it to her. "This contains names of everyone in my household. Vampires, human servants, regular visitors. Start there. Ask your questions. And Ilara, yes, be careful. Whoever tried to kill me will not hesitate to kill a human investigator asking inconvenient questions." Ilara took the journal, feeling its weight, both physical and metaphorical. "I walked through fire already, Lord Casimir. A few murderous vampires won't frighten me away." His lips curved in what might have been a smile. "No, I don't believe they will." The next 3 days were a lesson in observation and deception. Ilara began with the human servants, the people she had lived alongside for years. She visited the village, found Mira safe and well in a cottage provided by Casimir's coin, and used her sister's relief and gratitude as cover for her real purpose, gathering information. The servants talked, they always did, when someone who understood their world asked the right questions. "Terrible thing, that fire," said Martha, the head cook who had escaped the blaze. "Lord Casimir is a fair master, but there's some who don't like his ways. Say he's too soft on us humans. Let us forget our place." "Which of the vampires say that?" Ilara asked carefully, helping Martha chop vegetables for the evening meal. "Well, I shouldn't speak ill." Martha glanced around, then lowered her voice. "But Lord Victor, he's always making comments, saying we should be bled more regular, that Lord Casimir wastes his strength protecting cattle. And Lady Seraphine, she don't say it out loud, but you can see it in her eyes. She looks at us like we're dinner that got too many opinions." Ilara made mental notes. Victor and Seraphine. Both names were in the journal, both marked as members of Casimir's inner court. From the stable hands, she learned that several vampires had been seen near the manor's oil stores the day before the fire. From the gardeners, she discovered that Lord Victor had dismissed his usual human servants that week, claiming he preferred privacy. From the seamstress, she heard that Lady Seraphine had commissioned new mourning clothes 2 days before the fire, an odd choice, unless one expected a death. But it was the wine steward who provided the most information. "Lord Casimir was supposed to be in his chambers that night," the old man said, his voice shaking slightly as Ilara helped him inventory the cellar. "He always retires at midnight, regular as clockwork. But that night, he came down here instead. Said something about the vintage being off, wanted to check the casks personally." "Did he say who told him the vintage was off?" "Lord Victor mentioned it at dinner, said he'd noticed a funny taste." Elara felt pieces clicking into place. And did the vintage actually have a problem? Not that I could tell. Lord Casimir checked every cask, found nothing wrong. He seemed suspicious, like he knew something wasn't right. So Casimir had been lured away from his chambers deliberately. Victor had given him a reason to be elsewhere when the fire started, which meant— "Thank you," Elara said quietly. "You've been very helpful." The old steward grabbed her wrist suddenly, his eyes urgent. "Miss Elara, be careful. There's talk. Some of the vampire lords think you're getting too close to Lord Casimir, think he's using you to spy on them. They don't like it. I'll be careful." But careful wasn't enough. On the third night, Elara was returning to her room in the manor. She'd been given quarters in the human wing, comfortable but modest, when she felt it. The sensation of being watched, the prickle of predatory attention on the back of her neck. She didn't run. Running triggered a chase response in vampires, and she had no illusions about outrunning creatures who moved faster than mortal eyes could track. Instead, she stopped walking and turned to face the darkened corridor behind her. "I know you're there," she said calmly. "You might as well show yourself." For a moment, nothing. Then 3 figures materialized from the shadows, not emerging from hiding, but simply becoming visible, as if they'd been standing there all along and had only just decided to be seen. Lord Victor was tall and severe, with pale blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. Lady Seraphine was beautiful in that terrible, inhuman way of ancient vampires, all sharp angles and predatory grace. The third vampire Elara didn't recognize, a younger male with a cruel smile. "The little investigator," Victor said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Casimir's pet human, asking questions, stirring up trouble." Elara kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. "Lord Casimir asked me to look into the fire. I'm simply doing my job." "Your job," Seraphine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Humans don't have—" "The little investigator," Victor said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Casimir's pet human, asking questions, stirring up trouble." Elara kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. "Lord Casimir asked me to look into the fire. I'm simply doing my job." "Your job?" Seraphine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Humans don't have jobs in vampire society. They have functions. They serve, they feed, they die. In that order." "Lord Casimir seems to disagree with your assessment." "Lord Casimir has forgotten what he is." Victor moved closer, and Elara forced herself not to step back. "He's been corrupted by mortal sentiment, weakened by mercy. He treats cattle like people. He gives rights to food. It's an abomination." "So you tried to kill him?" Elara kept her voice level, stating it as fact rather than accusation. "You set the fire. You lured him to the wine cellar so he'd be away from his chambers. Then you burned his rooms, hoping he'd be trapped upstairs when the flames spread." The 3 vampires exchanged glances. Then Victor smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Clever little cattle. You figured it out." "But not clever enough," Seraphine added, "because now you're here, alone, with us, and no one knows where you are. And if you disappear, well, accidents happen. Humans are so fragile." The unnamed vampire moved to block the corridor behind her. Elara was surrounded. She had one chance. One desperate gambit. "Lord Casimir knows everything," she said, meeting Victor's eyes without flinching. I reported to him this afternoon. He knows about your involvement, about the fire, about your plans. If I don't return to my room safely, he'll have all the evidence he needs to bring you before the Vampire Council and charge you with attempted assassination. It was a lie. She hadn't reported yet, had wanted to be absolutely certain before she accused members of Casimir's inner court. But the vampires didn't know that. Victor's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Am I? Are you willing to bet your existence on it? Ilara forced a slight smile. Go ahead, kill me, and then explain to Lord Casimir why his investigator died the same night she discovered who tried to murder him. I'm sure the council will find that timing very coincidental. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Ilara could feel the tension, the barely restrained violence. These were predators, and she was prey, and every instant they had was screaming at them to rip her throat out. Then Victor stepped back. This isn't over, he hissed. Casimir's protection won't last forever, and when it fails, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that you could have died quietly. Next time, we won't be so merciful. They vanished, literally vanished, moving too fast for human perception to track. One moment they were there, the next, Ilara was alone in the corridor, shaking with reaction. She didn't go to her room. She went straight to Casimir's study. He was there, working through correspondence by candlelight. He looked up when she entered without knocking, and something in her face made him stand immediately. What happened? Ilara told him everything. The investigation, the evidence, the confrontation in the corridor. As she spoke, Casimir's expression grew colder and colder, until he looked like an ancient statue carved from ice and fury. They threatened you, he said quietly when she finished. They threatened my investigator, under my own roof, in my own house. They tried to kill you first, Ilara pointed out. I'm just collateral damage. You are under my protection. The words came out as a snarl, and suddenly Ilara saw the vampire lord in full. The apex predator, the ancient warrior, the creature who had survived 3 centuries by being absolutely ruthless when necessary. They dare threaten what is mine? Ilara blinked. I'm not. You accepted my employment. You shook my hand. You became part of my household. Casimir moved around the desk with terrifying grace. Which means you are under my protection, absolutely, and anyone who harms you harms me. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold that emanated from his undead body. His eyes were pure crimson now, glowing with barely contained rage. "Call a household meeting," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "All vampires, all servants, everyone under this roof. Tomorrow night in the Great Hall. We're going to settle this." "What are you going to do?" Casimir looked at her, and his expression was ancient and terrible. "I'm going to remind them why I'm the lord of this territory, and what happens to those who forget." The Great Hall of Thornfield Manor had been built to intimidate. 50 feet of vaulted ceiling, supported by columns carved with scenes of vampire conquest. Stained glass windows depicting the great battles of the undead. A throne-like chair at the head of a long table, where the master of the house could sit in judgment. Every vampire in Casimir's court was present, 15 of them, ranging from newly turned to ancient. Every human servant stood along the walls, forbidden to speak but required to witness. Ilara stood beside Casimir's chair, a position of honor that made several vampires stare at her with undisguised hostility. Casimir did not sit. He stood before his assembled court, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. 3 nights ago, someone tried to kill me. They set fire to my chambers, intending to burn me to ash. They failed. But in their attempt, they killed 3 innocent humans who served this house faithfully. He paused, letting the words sink in. I asked my investigator to discover who was responsible. She has done so. And now we will have justice. Victor stood, his face a mask of aristocratic disdain. You cannot seriously be acting on the word of a human servant. We are vampires. We do not answer to cattle.
You answer to me, Casimir said softly, and I say you will speak when I give you permission, Victor, not before. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Victor slowly sat back down, his jaw clenched. Casimir continued. The investigation revealed several interesting facts. Lord Victor, you were seen near the oil stores the day before the fire. You dismissed your servants, claiming a need for privacy. You lured me to the wine cellar with a false complaint about the vintage. And you purchased accelerants from a human merchant in the village. Yes, I checked with the merchant himself. He remembers you very well. Victor's face was pale, but he said nothing. Lady Seraphine, you commissioned mourning clothes 2 days before the fire. You told the seamstress you had a premonition of death. Very convenient. You were also overheard telling another court member that my weakness toward humans would be my downfall. And you were absent from the manor when the fire started, with no explanation for your whereabouts. Seraphine's hands were clenched on the table. You have no proof, just the gossip of servants and the paranoid theories of your pet human. I have enough proof to bring charges before the Vampire Council, Casimir replied, which I will do unless you confess now and face my judgment instead. The Council's justice is considerably less merciful than mine. The room was silent. Every vampire present knew the truth of that statement. The Council's favorite punishment for attempted assassination was to chain the guilty party in a courtyard and let the sun rise. It took hours for a vampire to burn to death in sunlight. Hours of agony, of screaming, of flesh blackening and cracking while the condemned remained conscious through every second. Casimir's justice might be severe, but it would be quick. Victor and Seraphine looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Victor stood again, and this time his voice was resigned. Yes. We set the fire. We tried to kill you, because you've made us weak, Casimir. You've made vampires subservient to human whims. You enforce laws that protect cattle. You punish our kind for feeding naturally. You treat mortals like they have rights. His lip curled. Your sister infected you with her mortal-loving madness, and you've spent 3 centuries spreading that infection through our kind. We acted to save vampire society from your corruption. How noble, Casimir said, his voice dripping with contempt. You murdered 3 innocent humans to make a political statement. You burned my home to prove a point about strength. Tell me, Victor, how strong are you now, standing before me confessing your crimes? Victor said nothing. Casimir turned to address the entire court. This is what I have learned in 300 years. Cruelty is not strength. Mercy is not weakness. The ability to choose restraint when you have the power to destroy, that is true power. That is what separates us from mindless beasts. His eyes swept across every vampire present. My sister understood that. She believed vampires could be more than predators. She died proving it. And I have built this territory on her vision. A place where humans and vampires coexist. Where laws apply to all. Where might does not make right. He moved to stand directly in front of Victor. You think I've gone soft? You think my mercy toward humans has made me weak? Then let me demonstrate exactly how wrong you are. What happened next was faster than mortal eyes could follow. One moment, Casimir was standing before Victor. The next, Victor was on his knees. Casimir's hand wrapped around his throat, squeezing with enough force that even an immortal creature struggled to breathe. I could crush your windpipe, rip your head from your shoulders, tear your heart from your chest. I could do it so quickly you wouldn't feel pain, just the sudden absence of existence.
That's what you expected, isn't it? That's the old way. The strong simply destroying the weak without trial or mercy. He released Victor, letting the vampire collapse gasping to the floor. But I'm not going to kill you, because unlike you, I do not solve every problem with violence. Unlike you, I understand that death is easy. Living with consequences is harder. Casimir stepped back, addressing the court again. Victor and Seraphine, you are hereby banished from my territory. You have until dawn to leave. If you are found within my borders after sunrise, I will hunt you myself, and there will be no mercy. Your property, your titles, your positions, all are forfeit. You will leave with nothing but your lives, and you will be grateful I'm allowing you even that. Seraphine stood, her face twisted with rage. You cannot. I can. I am the lord of this territory, confirmed by the council 300 years ago. I have the right to pass judgment on those who commit crimes within my borders. And attempted murder of a lord is a crime that typically carries a death sentence. I'm being merciful by letting you live. Don't mistake that mercy for weakness. He turned to the third vampire, the unnamed male who had been with Victor and Seraphine in the corridor. You, I recognize. You're newly turned, less than 50 years. You followed these two because you were young and foolish and didn't know better. You get one chance. Swear fealty to me now, honestly and completely, or join them in exile. The young vampire dropped to one knee immediately. I swear, Lord Casimir, I was wrong. I'll serve you faithfully. I'll never question your judgment again. See that you don't. Casimir's voice softened fractionally. You're young. You can learn. The question is whether you'll learn wisdom or simply learn better deception. Time will tell. He addressed the assembled court one final time. Let this be a lesson to all of you. I rule with mercy when I can, and strength when I must. I protect those under my care, vampire and human alike, and I will not tolerate challenges to that order. If anyone else harbors thoughts of rebellion or murder, speak now. Tell me to my face, or live with my law. Silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Good. Victor, Seraphine, you're dismissed. Pack quickly. Dawn comes whether you're ready or not. The two condemned vampires left the hall, their faces masks of humiliation and rage. The other court members began to file out quietly, casting glances at Alara that ranged from curiosity to resentment to something like respect. When the hall was empty except for Casimir and Alara, the vampire lord finally sat in his throne-like chair and closed his eyes. He looked, for just a moment, tired as an immortal creature could look. You handled that well,
Ilara said quietly. I hated every moment of it. Casimir opened his eyes, and they were their normal dark red again, no longer glowing with rage. Victor was right about one thing. My sister did change me. Before her death, I would have simply killed them both without trial or hesitation. She taught me to value justice over revenge. Sometimes I wonder if that makes me weak. It doesn't. Ilara moved closer, daring to approach the throne. It makes you someone worth following, someone worth serving. Those 3 servants who died in the fire, they mattered to you. Most vampire lords wouldn't have cared, but you did. You gave them justice. You made their deaths mean something. Casimir studied her face, and something shifted in his expression. You're not afraid of me, even after what you just witnessed. I've been afraid of you since the moment we met, Ilara admitted. But fear doesn't mean I don't respect you, or trust you to keep your word. 3 days ago, you walked through fire for your sister. Tonight, you stood beside me while I passed judgment on vampires who would have killed you without hesitation. You continue to surprise me, Ilara.
Is that a good thing? I'm not sure yet. But there was the faintest hint of warmth in his voice. Go, rest. You've earned it. Tomorrow, we'll discuss what comes next. Ilara nodded and turned to leave, but at the doorway she paused. Lord Casimir, thank you for protecting me, for seeing me as more than just a servant. You're welcome. And Ilara. He waited until she looked back. You may call me Casimir. We've walked through fire together, literally in your case. Titles seem unnecessary between people who've shared that. She smiled slightly. Casimir, then. Good night. Good night. Over the next months, Ilara's role in the household evolved into something unprecedented. She was not quite a servant, not quite an advisor, but something in between. A bridge between the human and vampire worlds. Someone both sides could talk to and trust. She investigated disputes between human villagers. She advised Casimir on how his decrees would affect the mortal population. She sat in on court sessions, offering perspectives that the vampires had never considered. And slowly, grudgingly, even the most traditional vampires began to respect her. More surprisingly, Ilara began to understand Casimir himself, the vampire lord who hid a grieving brother's heart beneath centuries of controlled power. They fell into a pattern of evening conversations, where she would report on the day's events, and he would share stories of the world before she was born. She learned about his sister, the idealistic vampire who had believed in coexistence. She learned about the wars he'd fought, the treaties he'd brokered, the slow, painful process of building a territory where humans had rights instead of just functions. And Casimir learned about her, about parents lost to fever, about raising a child while barely more than a child himself, about the quiet strength it took to survive in a world where you were born prey.
He learned that courage came in many forms, and that the mortal woman who had run into fire without hesitation also read poetry, loved mathematics, and had a dry sense of humor that occasionally made even an ancient vampire laugh. "You're different from other humans," he said one evening, as they sat in his study reviewing reports. "I'm really not," Ilara replied, not looking up from her paperwork. "I'm just the one you're actually paying attention to." Perhaps that's the real revelation, that any human might be remarkable if given the chance to prove it. Your sister would be proud of you. Casimir was quiet for a long moment. I hope so. Some days, I'm not sure I'm honoring her memory or just postponing the inevitable. Vampire society is built on predation. Eventually, the old ways always resurface. Then you fight them each time they do. You keep building what she believed in, You don't give up just because it's hard. Ilara finally looked up, meeting her eyes. That's what she did, isn't it? She kept believing even when it was dangerous, even when it got her killed. She walked into fire for children she didn't know, Casimir, softly. Just like you walked into fire for your sister. Perhaps that's why I see her in you. That same refusal to accept that goodness must be sacrificed for safety. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, an understanding that went beyond employer and employee, beyond vampire and human. Two people who had both lost someone they loved, who had both chosen to honor that loss by refusing to become cynical or cruel. I should go, Ilara said, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how intimate this conversation had become. Mira will be expecting me. How is your sister? Happy. She's apprenticing with the village healer, learning medicine. She wants to help people. Ilara smiled. She sends you her thanks, by the way. Says you changed her life. I did nothing. You changed her life. You saved her. You provided everything. Safety, opportunity, a future. Ilara stood, gathering her. You provided everything. Safety, opportunity, a future. Ilara stood, gathering her papers. Don't diminish what you've done, Casimir. You've given us both a chance at a life we never could have had. That matters. Over the following weeks, Ilara noticed a change in Casimir's behavior toward her. He sought her opinion more often. He invited her to social events where previously only vampires had been present. He gave her access to restricted areas of the manor, trusting her with information that could have been dangerous in the wrong hands. The other vampires noticed too. Some resented it. Some whispered that the Lord was becoming too attached to a mortal. But no one dared challenge it openly. Not after Victor and Seraphine's exile had demonstrated exactly what happened to those who questioned Casimir's decisions. It was Mira who finally voiced what everyone was thinking. He cares about you, she said one afternoon as Ilara visited her in the village. Not as an employee, as something else. Don't be ridiculous. He's a 300-year-old vampire lord. I'm a human servant. There's no something else possible between us. Then why does he look at you the way he does? Like you're the most important person in the room. Like he's seeing something precious that he thought was lost forever. Ilara had no answer to that. The crisis came 6 months after the fire. A delegation arrived from the Vampire Council, 3 ancient vampires who made even Casimir seem young by comparison. They had come to investigate reports of unrest in his territory, of a lord who had grown soft on humans, of laws that violated traditional vampire society. Ilara was forbidden from attending the initial meeting. She waited in her room, pacing anxiously, knowing that everything they'd built was being judged by creatures who viewed humans as nothing more than food. It was past midnight when Casimir came to her door. "Walk with me," he said, quietly. They walked through the manor gardens in silence until they reached a secluded area far from any windows or listening ears. Only then did Casimir speak. "They want me to execute you." Ilara's breath caught. "What?" "The council believes I've become compromised, that I've elevated a human to a position of influence that undermines vampire authority. They see you as evidence of my corruption." His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the rage beneath it. "They've given me a choice. Execute you publicly as a demonstration that I remember what humans are. Or step down as lord of this territory and let them install someone more traditional." "Then step down." Ilara said it immediately, without hesitation. "I'm not worth your position. I'm not worth everything you've built here." "That's not your decision to make." "Casimir!" "No. He turned to face her fully, and his eyes were blazing with emotion she'd never seen before. "You don't understand. I spent 300 years building this territory as a monument to my sister's beliefs. I've created laws, established protections, proven that coexistence is possible. And now they want me to destroy all of that by killing an innocent woman who embodies everything my sister believed humans could be. They want me to prove their worldview is correct by becoming the monster they insist I am. But if I refuse, they'll remove me, install some traditionalist who will turn this valley into a hunting ground. All the protections I've established will be gone. The humans here will become prey again. Everything I've worked for will be destroyed." Ilara felt tears burning in her eyes. "Then you have to do it. You have to kill me. Because my life isn't worth all those others. My life isn't worth destroying 300 years of progress." Casimir stared at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw pain, raw, ancient pain, in his immortal features. "Do you remember what I told you when you first accepted my employment? That you reminded me of my sister, that you had the same courage, the same refusal to accept injustice." His voice was barely a whisper. "She walked into fire for strangers. And now you're telling me to kill you to save strangers. How am I supposed to honor her memory if I do that? How am I supposed to live with myself if I destroy the very thing she believed in?" "You're supposed to survive," Ilara said, tears spilling down her cheeks now. "You're supposed to keep fighting for what she believed in. And if my death is the price for that, then it's a price I'll pay. Gladly. Because you were right, Casimir. What you've built here matters. The laws you've established matter. The protection you've given these people matters more than one human life, more than my life. Not to me." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "Not to me, Ilara. You matter to me. Not as an employee, not as a symbol. As a person, as someone He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "As someone I have come to care for deeply." The world seemed to stop. Ilara looked at this ancient, powerful creature and saw past the vampire lord to the man who had loved his sister, who had mourned for 3 centuries, who had finally found someone who reminded him what it was to hope. "Casimir," she whispered, "you can't. I'm human. I'm mortal. I'm going to grow old and die while you stay eternally unchanged. There's no future for us." "I know. Don't you think I know?" He reached out, and his cool fingers touched her face with heartbreaking gentleness. "But knowing doesn't change how I feel. Doesn't change that when I look at you, I see everything good that still exists in this world, everything worth protecting, everything my sister died believing in. Then protect it. Protect your territory. Protect the people who depend on you." Ilara covered his hand with hers. "Let me go, Casimir. Let me be the sacrifice that saves everything else."
For a long moment, they stood there in the moonlit garden, vampire and human, immortal and mortal, 2 people who had found something precious in the most unlikely of circumstances. Then Casimir pulled away, his expression hardening into something Ilara had never seen before, absolute, uncompromising resolve. "No," he said, "I won't do it. I won't kill you. I won't become what they want me to be. And I won't step down and let them destroy everything I've built." "Then what will you do?" "Something my sister would have done." Casimir looked at her, and there was a wildness in his eyes, the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. Something impossible,
Something that will either change everything or destroy me. And I need you to trust me. I do trust you. Then come with me, right now. We are going to face the council together, and we are going to show them that the old ways are already dead. They just haven't realized it yet. The council chamber was a place designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadows. Ancient tapestries depicted vampire victories over humans. The 3 council members sat on elevated thrones, looking down on those like gods judging mortals. Casimir entered with Ilara at his side, a deliberate statement that no one could miss. The council members exchanged glances. Lord Valdrin, the eldest, spoke, his voice like wind through a crypt. We gave you until dawn to make your decision. It is still night. Have you chosen? I have. Casimir's voice rang through the chamber with absolute confidence. I reject both of your options. I will not kill Ilara, and I will not step down. The chamber went deathly silent. You cannot refuse the council, another member said, leaning forward. That is not how our society functions. Then perhaps it's time our society functioned differently. Casimir moved to stand directly before them, unintimidated by their ancient power. For 300 years, I have proven that coexistence between humans and vampires is possible. I have built a territory where both can thrive, where laws apply to all, where strength is measured by wisdom rather than cruelty. And it works. My lands are prosperous. My people, both vampire and human, are content. There is no rebellion, no unrest, no chaos that you claim must result from treating humans as more than prey. You have become emotionally compromised by this mortal, the 3rd council member said, gesturing dismissively at Ilara. You see her as an equal. It has clouded your judgment. No, she has clarified my judgment. Casimir looked back at Ilara, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. 6 months ago, this woman walked through fire to save her sister. She burned herself to ash and shattered her own bones because someone she loved needed her. That is not the action of cattle. That is not the behavior of prey. That is courage that would shame most vampires I know. He turned back to the council. And in the months since, she has proven herself again and again. She investigated a conspiracy that threatened my life. She stood up to vampires who would have killed her. She advised me on matters of law and justice, offering perspectives I could never have gained alone. She has earned her position through merit, through intelligence, through strength of character that transcends her mortality. She is still human, the eldest council member said coldly. She will age. She will die. She will be dust long before you even notice the passage of time. What you feel for her is meaningless in the span of eternity. Then I will cherish what meaning it has while it lasts. Casimir's voice was fierce. My sister died believing humans were worth saving, worth respecting, worth treating as equals despite their brief lives. I have spent 300 years proving she was right. And now you want me to betray everything she believed in, everything I've built, because you cannot imagine loving something you cannot own forever? Because you cannot conceive of valuing something that doesn't last eternally? He spread his arms, addressing all 3 council members. If that is what vampire society has become, if we are so afraid of change, so committed to cruelty, so unable to see worth in anything that isn't immortal, then vampire society deserves to die. The chamber erupted. Vampires who had been observing from the shadows emerged, shouting. The council members stood, their faces masks of rage and shock. But Casimir wasn't finished. "I challenge the council," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I invoke the ancient right of reformation. I challenge the laws that make humans property. I challenge the traditions that make mortality worthless. And I challenge any vampire here to prove that the old ways are better than what I have built." The eldest council member stared at him. "You cannot be serious. The right of reformation hasn't been invoked in 5 centuries. You would risk everything on proving that my sister was right. Yes." Casimir looked at Alara one more time, and his eyes held centuries of grief and hope and desperate love. "I would risk everything for that, for her memory, for this woman standing beside me, for the future I believe is possible." The council members conferred in whispers too quick for Alara to follow. Then the eldest spoke again. "Very well. The right of reformation is granted. You have 1 year to prove that your territory's laws can spread to others, to demonstrate that coexistence is sustainable not just in your isolated valley, but across vampire society. If you succeed, the council will revise our laws accordingly. If you fail—" He leaned forward, and his ancient eyes glowed with predatory satisfaction. "If you fail, you will be stripped of your title, your territory, and your life.
And the human you have elevated will be executed as an example of why mortals should never be trusted with power. Accepted." "Casimir, no." Alara grabbed his arm, but he gently removed her hand. "I accept the terms," he repeated. 1 year. I will prove that everything I've built here can be replicated elsewhere, that humans and vampires can coexist as equals, that my sister's dream can become reality." The council members smiled, cold and satisfied. They believed he would fail. They had given him an impossible task, confident that in 1 year's time they would have an excuse to destroy everything had built. But as Alara looked at Casimir, at the determination in his ancient eyes, at the set of his jaw, at the way she stood as if she could hold up the entire weight of the future on her shoulders alone, she realized something profound. They had underestimated him, just as they had underestimated her, just as they underestimate every human who proved to be more than prey, every vampire who chose mercy over cruelty, every person who believed the world could be better than it was. And that underestimation would be their downfall. "We should begin immediately," Casimir said, as they left the council chamber. His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining, vampire and human, cold and warm. "We have 1 year to change vampire society, to prove that coexistence isn't just possible, but preferable, to honor my sister's memory and secure your future." "Our future," Alara corrected softly. "However long I have, I'll spend it fighting for this, for what we're building." He stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlit corridor. "Alara, you need to understand what you're committing to. This won't be easy. We'll face resistance from traditionalists, danger from those who want us to fail. The council is hoping we'll make a mistake they can exploit. Your life will be in constant danger."